Welcome to From X to Z, the show that believes you never age out of learning about the world around you. Featuring social media maven Danielle Farage and Mervyn, the analyst who puts the X in expert. They're here to talk all things jobs, HR, and trends. So mind the generational gap. This is From X to Z, only on the Purple Acorn Network.
Hello, hello. Welcome back to From X to Z. My name is Danielle Farage. I'm joined by Mervyn Dinnen, our Gen expert. How you doing, Mervyn?
I'm good. Thank you. I'm over my. I think last time we spoke, I was complaining about I had no Wi-Fi and the UK is terrible when you move home and stuff. And I still don't have much Wi-Fi, but I'm here. I've stopped complaining now, much to the wife's happiness. I've stopped complaining.
Yeah, you sound like a Gen Zer with all your complaining.
I know. Well, this is real. I'm in here talking to Gen Z, and she's inside watching Judge Judy.
Oh, lovely.
I told her I was going to say that.
I met Judge Judy when I was like a junior in college. She came to speak at USC. Yeah, so random.
Oh.
Definitely fangirled her.
we should get her on as a guest one week.
We should. Maybe I can get her contact info. Well, it's very great to see you. I hope you're enjoying the summer sun. It looks like you are.
Yes.
We have a really important topic to talk about today. It's definitely related to mental health, but it's more focused on happiness. I personally have been thinking a lot about happiness because I've been traveling the world. I went to Paris, I went to Menorca, and obviously I follow the World Happiness Reports, of which the US is ranked very low. And it's really, I think when you travel the world, you just gain perspective as far as how other people live. There were a lot of Brits actually in Menorca when I went. So, just talking to people from all over the world, I think it brings out this sense of I think pride for where you're from and what everything that you have afforded to you given where you're from and where you live, and B, I think a sense of gratitude, and I think that there's a lot of studies out there that show a huge link between gratitude and gratitude practices and daily happiness, everyday happiness. So yeah, those are my opening thoughts today is just, the summer sun, the being present, the weekend adventures. I've been trying to focus more on just being present and just enjoying the moment. I don't know about you, Mervyn, but that is what I have going on my mind. What about you?
Um, that's an interesting one. I suppose I'm thinking a lot around at the moment. A lot of the stuff that I'm doing and speaking to people about is around AI and things like that.
Yeah.
It's interesting when you're saying things like gratitude because I think the way we are in the workplace is highly important. And I think that the how we interact with and how we treat our fellow colleagues and how our peers, how our leaders treat us is very important. It's very important to employee engagement. It's very important to, why people remain with an organization, why they join them in the first place. And so I think that's quite an interesting topic to be looking at, particularly getting, I suppose, your perspective from Gen Z, because when I started work, you got paid at the end of the month, and that was their way of saying thanks for turning up. It's kind of like, what more do you want?
Yeah, and there are so many contributing factors to, your everyday happiness. So linked to the workplace. And I know there's a number of studies about, your manager having a direct link to your happiness. And, if they're a bad manager, you're probably going to be less happy on on the average day. But yeah, I think it's why don't we dive in to the story today? Because then we can build a little bit more off of it. So what we're looking at is a survey, basically, that we've been doing for a great number of years. And the happiness curve has essentially been a U shape for a long time. You're at your happiest when you're younger. You know, you have your whole life ahead of you, you have your whole career ahead of you. And as you go on, I think you kind of go down and then you go back up. And I guess raising kids is a pretty large feat, or so I've heard. But according to this global flourishing study, which comes out of Harvard and Baylor University, they analyzed this new collection of data, and they essentially found, from 200,000 people in 22 countries, they discovered that on average, young adults between 18 and 29, which I fall into, were unhappy. And I think there's a number of reasons for this, but the largest challenges that were reported are poor mental health, physical health, a lack of meaning in their life, financial security, and the quality of their relationships. And so that is sort of what we're talking about today. This is seen across several different countries, including the UK, Australia, and the widest gap between younger and older adults, which we were talking about the U shape. The widest gap between those was why it was widest in the US. So it is a very it's kind of a scary picture, but I think it leads us to ask ourselves whether or not we're sufficiently investing in the well-being of young people today. And it also leads us to question, why are young people so unhappy today? And there are several reasons we can kind of dive in. But Mervyn, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Just your first impressions of this article and this study, and maybe some of your own, thoughts as to why people are so unhappy today.
I suppose, I mean, I think we've covered it once or twice before, probably in terms of the workplace. I think that it's harder and harder for people to come in and to get established and to, I suppose, enjoy what I would have enjoyed when I was kind of in my early 20s, which is joining a firm, being trained, learning from people around me, learning from older people around me. They invested in me. As I've said probably previously, had to pass a couple of professional exams, but they supported me in that. And that they were then, offering you a path, offering you a career path, and mapping out this is how it will be. And as I think I said in a previous episode, there weren't that many people over the age of 60 when I started in the workplace, because they're either retired or whereas now, people in the 70s and 80s are still working on. So it's a much different span. So I think that there was always, not everywhere, but most people that I knew, that I trained with, I was at school with when they were doing their first jobs, seemed to work for companies who treated them fairly well, trained. And I think there was probably less of a kind of, we need you to prove yourself, and we'll give you not minimal support, but we'll give you a bit of support, but we need to see what you're made of. We need to see, if you can pick this up and run with it. And there was less of that, I think, and more investment in, the person as, a future employee, and therefore training them well and giving them the right opportunities and exposing them to, I suppose, more interesting working things. And that also led to a bit of a bond between employees as well. And I suppose there has been a gradual change over the last 20, 30 years, probably, in terms of this, rather than, thank you for choosing to work with us. We're going to support you in every which way we can to make you realize you made a great decision to come and work for us, as opposed to, now show us why we should hire you. And let's see, before we invest further, let's see what you're made of, and let's see, what what you can do under your own initiative. And I think there's a bit more of people coming in to organizations and having to show themselves and prove themselves. As opposed, I was luckier in that it was kind of, I could come in on the basis when it was up to them to kind of, teach me and support me.
Yeah. It's I think it's specifically hard right now also because we have so many more people attending college. And the cultural norm that at least I witnessed when I was in school is, you go become a doctor, I guess this is how it used to be. It was like doctor, lawyer, maybe like go into sales. But now it's much more, you go into finance, you go into consulting, and those career paths are not sure things. And when you have so many people going and pursuing the same path, that now with, the introduction and mass introduction of AI, those paths are becoming extremely, you know the opportunities are few and far between. I think it's really difficult for younger people, not just as far as finding a company that is willing to invest in them, because they don't have the necessary skills coming out of school, which is a whole other issue. But how much that actually plays into like a psychological and and financial unsafety, that I think is contributing to this lack of happiness. It's like you pursue. I'll just paint a picture for you.
Mm.
The average student, right, goes to maybe a $200,000 university, graduates with that amount of debt in student loans, maybe a little bit less. And they then go and maybe pursue consulting. They're making, let's be, generous here, $100,000 a year. Their expenses, if they live in New York City, are maybe closer to $60,000 a year, maybe even more. So they're really not taking home much to pay off their student loans. Then you have the introduction of AI and like mass layoffs, and also, maybe hiring freezes, or you're not even being called up to, work on a project. You then have someone who is incredibly fearful that what they've done so far in their career, like there's no further path for them. They have to scramble and figure out what's next. They don't know how many months they have left. Like, it's a very scary time to be graduating college, to be in your early career. I think for different reasons, maybe, then it's scary to be further along in your career right now. But I do think that the lack of happiness, and I think one of the reasons that the study found is a lack of meaning and direction, is really derived from this lack of investment in young professionals. And I think we've talked about this before, where it's like, it's the chicken or the egg. Do you, are organizations not investing up front because they think that people are going to leave? Or is it the other way around, right? Are people not, maybe people are going to stay at this point because the economic situation and the job market is so unstable. That's definitely what we're seeing. People are staying longer at their jobs. But I do think that, this lack of meaning and direction, the financial concerns, 56% of young adults being concerned about their financial well-being. I'm not sure if that's been, the case. If 56% of people under the age of 29 have been concerned about their financial well-being, but I think these numbers are pretty high.
Mm. Yeah, well, there used to be a thing that I saw many times. You might have seen it on LinkedIn a few years ago as well, with this kind of, what happens if we hire people and we give them training and they leave? And the other person says, what happens if we don't give them any training and they stay? It's kind of like there's this kind of, if we bring people in and invest in them and then they leave, it's kind of almost a waste of time and money for
Mhm.
us. But also, all we're really doing is kind of training up, somebody to be a competitor or something, if you like. But of course, if people want to build a career with you and you're a good place to work, which to be a good place to work, it means you would need to support people and help them. So I mean, if you're not giving them training, the chances are it's going to be a revolving door anyway. But is that kind of, I suppose it's, whereas talking about when I started, it was a given that you would get training straight away.
Yeah.
Uh, but people, as you say, are coming in now much more from backgrounds in university and college, where they already have I suppose, an idea of what it is they want to do. I'm guessing that I haven't seen recent stats, but I'm guessing that most of the kind of roles people, say in your generation, want to do are much in demand. Um, and therefore, it's kind of, to what extent, I suppose, do you offer the training and support? Do you offer the learning? Um, because people might not stay, or there might be other reasons why they decide to leave. So it's kind of, uh, I think organizations have to accept that, if they're going to invest in bringing people in, they need to support those people. They need to give the people all the tools and training that they need to perform well. Because that in itself, if you're doing well at work and you're learning and, you feel you've got the support and knowledge that you need, you feel you've got the tools to operate, then, well-being is better, mental health is better, how you feel about the organization is better. If organizations want to grow and be places that attract the best people, then they've got to offer training, learning, support, a great culture, a great environment, and opportunity.
It reminds me a little bit of like parenting because, and obviously I'm not a
No,
parent yet, but I see a lot of like mirroring from parenting to like how you really should treat your employees in regards to growth, right? If you're a parent and you know that your kid is probably going to go to college and like leave the nest eventually, but you have this mentality of like never leave me, never leave me. You can't experiment with like any alcohol, like you can't leave the house, you have to be home at a certain time, like with these really like strict and rigid rules. It might end up backfiring. Most likely it's going to end up backfiring versus letting your kid explore and be and say like, here are the boundaries, here are the this is what I would do if I were you. Here are the tools to be smart. Yes, I'm going to give you car keys, but I'm also going to, make sure that you know to always be driving, with someone else in the car or like having some sort of confines and boundaries, but still allowing that level of freedom for them to explore. And I can't help but think an organization is like a very similar situation. If you're a boss and you're treating your employee like, you can never leave me, you can never leave me. And I've been in that situation where I'm, on the receiving end of it. All I want to do is leave because you're so afraid that I'm going to leave you. Well, is there a reason why I should think about leaving? That kind of is where my mind goes. Whereas if it's like, oh, like know that I am supportive of you taking that next step in your career and doing what you need to do to grow and to continue to flourish, like I'm going to do whatever it takes to help you do that, even if it means that you have to leave. That's the type of leader I want to, learn from and work under. And that's also the type of parent that I think I experienced growing up was like, and maybe it has to do with the fact that I am the third kid. So there was a little bit more of a lax parenting style, but I think I turned out pretty good. But in regards to the training thing that you were talking about, it's funny because I made a video maybe like almost a year ago at this point, and I posted it on TikTok, and it was about how a lot of people are not getting training. And I was like literally talking about this issue. And I said 20, 30 years ago, people used to get a lot more training. I actually don't think that's true. I think it's even longer ago. It's like 40, 50 years ago that people used to get training because I hit a really a sore button. Like people in the comments were like, "No, I never got any training. Like I graduated 20, 30 years ago, and people were really upset because again, like organizations have the responsibility. It is on them, in my opinion. Of course, the responsibility is split. It's like you need to come into the workplace having some of the skills, having, the market knowledge, having done your research and education to be ready to learn on the job. But for the most part, I do think that organizations should be educating people as they come through the door.
Mm. Oh yeah, yeah. I think that the um, there's little to be gained. If anybody wants to know, I keep scratching. I'm sitting in a room. The windows have been open all day, and I'm in the height of hay fever season here in London, and I am suffering badly, particularly in this room where it's probably pollen been flying around all day because the windows have been open. Um,
No.
I yeah, no, I think it's important that when if you make the investment to hire someone, there's an investment both ways. Somebody is placing their future in your hands, and you're placing your business's future in some respects in their hands. So there's almost like a playoff here in that, you need to offer them training, you need to offer them that access to learning and development, because otherwise they won't be fulfilled, they won't be happy, they'll leave, and you'll gain a reputation of being a company where people don't stay because they don't feel they can learn anything or progress. Whereas what you want to be is an organization that really supports people. And
Yeah.
that's a great place to work. I learned so much there, and they gave me loads of opportunity. And, they gave me some great clients to work on, although I was only in my second year. Those kind of stories that people tell others within their age cohort about, this was a great company to work. They really looked after you and this,
Yeah.
that, and the other. And those are the stories that are important to people on the job market. And
Yeah.
particularly in the era of social media, of sites like LinkedIn and stuff, it's very easy for people to do research that I wasn't able to do years ago, into what it's like to work for a company. Mine would have been speaking to people. Have you heard of this company? Do you know what they're like
Hmm.
to work for? And I think I said in a previous episode, I left a job after 2 days once because I'd been completely missold. And I realized within 48 hours I'd made an awful mistake. It so happened that I had turned down an offer to join them. And I took the plunge and said, I'm basically at the end of the second day said, I'm not coming in tomorrow. I've made an awful mistake. On the hope that the other company offered me would keep that open and they did.
Wow. That's
Um,
wild.
it was a bit, but I just, after 48 hours, I felt, I just don't want to be here. And I know that a lot of people said to me, "How could you do that? You didn't. The first few days were always difficult." I said, "I just knew. It was a small company. The environment, the atmosphere was poor. I didn't get any positive vibes. Through
Yeah.
my 8 hours there.
Vibe check.
Yeah, that this was going to be a place I was going to be happy. And yet,
Yeah.
during my two interviews, it was sold to me as, the most dynamic, fantastic small business in my sector that was in London. And it's kind of like, they can do this, they can do that. And it's kind of, I think in some respects you have to trust your gut, but then, you'll be leaving jobs after 5 minutes all the time if you did that. I suppose.
But it's funny that you bring up that word happy, right? And I don't think that was like necessarily super intentional of you. I think it was subconsciously like a word that you use because when you think about and you're weighing different options, the first question is, where will I be happier? Which leads me to a question I'd love to pose to you, which is, are organizations responsible for our happiness? And if so, then whose responsibility is it specifically? And what are the best ways, I think, to, increase happiness and to keep that up? What are the most effective strategies that organizations can maybe take away from this conversation?
Ah, well, I suppose that quite a few leaders would say that the happiness, in some respects, is your responsibility. We've created, a good place to work where you can achieve good things, and we've given you a platform and training, but it's up to you to be happy, I suppose. And the a lot of that also, I think, comes down to colleagues. It comes down to the culture, the kind of people that you're working with. And in my days as a recruiter, I would often interview people who would say, look, it's a good organization, everything, but I just don't like people. I just don't get on with people there. And it's just not my place, culture. And it was very difficult to define what they meant, other than I don't think I fit in, or I just don't like, it's too this, it's too laddish, it's too that, it's too, people used to, you had to feel comfortable there. And I think
Mhm.
that possibly is a sign of a more stable job market to what there is nowadays. Um, but that culture and environment, I think, is important, because that's what people, you spend a lot of time at work, even in the days of remote and hybrid work, you spend a lot of time thinking about the organization you're working for, if you're not physically there. And it's something you want to be a part of. It's something you want to be proud to say, I work for Purple Acorn. Yeah, great company.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Um, but that's what people want to say. You'll always have the moaners who don't. Who just want to be negative about things. Um, but again, that comes down to people. And I think that organizationally, the kind of people you hire, leads to the kind of culture you have. As it does, your approach to learning, your approach to development, your approach to remuneration, how you encourage people, all of that plays into, is this a good place to work where I'm happy? Is it a place where I feel positive? I think that's the most important thing. And I think that nowadays, um, it, it's, it is vitally important, and Gen Z, your generation, I'll let you talk about it in a moment, but I think that you almost would be much quicker to form a view. You would almost like know instantly, look, I've made a mistake, a bit like I did. I was an early Gen Z when I left after 2 days, but it was like, I just know already this isn't the place for me. Um, and I don't know what you think about that, but if Gen Z are more likely to think like that, or are they more likely to say, you know what, I've been through rounds of interviews, I know the reputation, I'm going to give it some time.
Yeah. I think you're right in saying that Gen Z is very quick to form opinions. I think we live in a very kind of quick society where we form opinions very quickly with very little information. And I will say I've been in a situation where I didn't think a culture was right for me, and whether or not it was or wasn't isn't necessarily as important as what I did about it. And what I did was I asked my mom, because she spent like 40 years in the tech industry as a female. And, she said, ride it out and just see how you feel in 6 months. And I think that was the best piece of advice. And I encourage people who are, unhappy, but where it's not an overwhelming feeling, like it's not taken over their day. It's not like it's a toxic work environment, but who are just unhappy or feeling that like they're not growing. Before you quit or before you pursue other opportunities, figure out what can be done internally, if there are other opportunities within the organization or people you could talk to, who you feel safe with. And because the grass isn't always greener, right? And to the organizations, like it's funny because I feel like Gen Z would be quick to say, no, you're responsible for my happiness at work because I'm working for you. And, I don't make the rules and I don't make the culture, but like I show up. And therefore, if I show up, I want to show up and like be happy where I am. And I think that, you know, the way that you could take ownership as an organization is if you just look at all the contributing factors to this like lack of happiness. You think of meaning and direction, like think about and maybe reflect as a leader, as a manager of several employees. It's like, are you providing opportunities for people to think about and to reflect on the meaning of their work or the direction of their career? Are you aware whether or not they feel financial pressure? There was a great initiative. I think it was City that did it a couple of years ago, where they made sure that all employees had at least 10%, of their paycheck left over for any spending, any like additional spending that non expense related. So that's a great example of how to reflect and how to move forward with that kind of initiative. Pressure to achieve, like feeling that the world is falling apart. Are you regularly addressing, the state of the world and like what's going on, or are you just glossing over it? And of course, you don't need to get political, but just an acknowledgement of, it's a really hard time for those of you who are in X community, or it's a hard time for all of us right now. Like, how can you instill and infuse some sort of joy into like the everyday of work? And I think as a leader, it's your responsibility to do that. And I've been a leader. I am a leader of my own life. But constantly, reflecting on those questions of are you, providing those types of opportunities for your employees? Are you creating a sense of community and camaraderie? I think it goes a long way, especially with younger employees. So that is my little soapbox for the day. And I think we're going to wrap this episode up because we're going a little bit over time today. I guess we're just so passionate about
Yep.
happiness. But Mervyn, any final thoughts to leave our listeners with today?
Yes. Happiness. You've got to be happy in your workplace, because otherwise you won't produce your best work, and it's debilitating. And I've once or twice worked in environments where it's not happy. It's very competitive. It's very, and they aren't great places to work. And the thing is that we all have lives outside of that. So the obviously you're quite young, but yeah, older people in the organisation have got families at home and things. And
They do.
if you're unhappy at work, then that spills into everything else. Um, and so it's kind of, it needs to be a place where you feel comfortable and you feel you are happy. And a lot of that comes from the support you're given, the training you're given, the responsibility you're given, and your ability to learn. So I think it's happiness is important, but it's, I suppose it's a many multifaceted thing now. And that's why it's kind of like it has to be, if you're working in an organization, it has to be a place that is like works for you.
Yeah. And I would say, like, I think that a lot of younger people that I speak to on the day to day are really aware of how happy or not they are. And it's, I think the best thing that you could do, and the most basic thing you could do is not just like wait around and wait for someone to, make your life better or make yourself happier, but really own it and say to yourself, like, I'm in this situation right now. This is a temporary feeling and emotion, and I don't have to let this be my entire personality or what I feel all of the time. I don't need to be defined by this emotion of unhappiness, and that everything is changed. Most things are changeable. Most things are in your control. So I would say growth mindset is the way to go if you are trying to get out of where you are. And to all of you who are feeling unhappy right now, again, know that this is just a moment and it will pass. And you are in the driver's seat of not only your career, but your entire life. So thank you so much for joining us for this episode of From X to Z, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.